business. First item on our agenda is the adoption of our agenda. Any discussion on the adoption of the agenda? If not, a motion would be in order.
I'll second first.
Second.
Moved by Stephanie, second by Dwayne. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the agenda has been adopted. In your packets were minutes from the June 26th and July 11th board meeting. Any discussion on the board minutes from June 26th and July 11th? If not, a motion would be in order.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Wolf.
Second, Paul.
Seconded by Mr. Ball. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The minutes are passed. Thank you. Mr. Centeus, our board president, is joining us virtually. Sam, any updates from the president today?
So for board report, apologies for being out of town today. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
So a couple things just to cover from a board president report. One, that I know Davion's got some photos to show, but you know, the big back to school event that the South Bend Department Zone hosted with La Casa Amistad was great to see. Over 2,000 people attended that event, and that was fantastic. It was a great opportunity to mingle with our faculty, staff, students, and community at that event. One, just we enjoyed welcoming all of the returning teachers and staff back. It was fun. Several of us board members attended and served breakfast to the team before they kicked off their work, and it was great to see them. So excited and backed for another great school year. The other one, thanks for the people behind the scenes, Synergistic, SSC, Chartwells, of course. It was great, like when we were doing the food event, every time I turned around to yell for more, we need more food or more sausage or whatever, they were right there ready and helping. And thank their partnership and everybody that's helped get our school buildings prepared and ready for students to return. And then there's a couple of great events coming up, so I won't read the list that's kind of here. I think it should be on the screen there for everybody to see. But I know one I saw was getting shared a lot around on Facebook with the South Bend Bike Garage event and other partnerships that are being created with the South Bend Department Zone with community partners. And so there's great folks that are putting together some really exciting programs for our students and families this upcoming year. The other one, talking about just some upcoming adoption of goals, just watching our future board meetings as our committees continue to work through working on goals for this upcoming school year and the future of the South Bend Empowerment Zone. So that's about my report. Thank you, Jeff, for running the meeting for me while I'm gone.
Great. Thank you, Sam, and thank you for your leadership on some of these important items. Next on our agenda is a focus report on iLearn and some school spotlights. Dr. Lewis, I'll turn to you. Mrs. Zapata, I'll turn to you.
Good evening. I will be going over quite a few data slides, and so I'm going to move us through them and be able to share some of the highlights of our iLearn data. Here we have a summary of the results, kind of biggest picture, high level, and we can see that for all of our SBEZ schools on the left, we have had the highest average growth when compared to the other groups, and no negative growth. Both ELA and math had the highest growth and nothing negative. If we go to the next slide, you can see the summary of results by school now. And you can see both proficiency on the left. You can see on the right the growth or the percentage points of growth in proficiency percentages at our schools. We are excited to say we have positive growth at all schools in both content areas, ELA and math, and you can see that on the right table. When we look at the summary disaggregated by grade level, we can see that 7th grade, which this year is our 8th grade, is an area of focus, an area of concern, and you can see the growth points or percentage points of growth across the other grade levels. Here we can see the disaggregation now by subgroups, from free and reduced lunch, the first acronym, to compared to paid, special education compared to general education, English language learners compared to non-English language learners. Then we have Black, Hispanic, Latino, multiracial, and white. Oops. Okay. And we have had growth in all subgroup areas for both. Let's see. Is that echoing? that better? Okay. Growth in all subgroup areas in both content, ELA and math, except for multiracial students in math. We can look at the next slide at our historical proficiency, again by school, from the first year that iLearn assessments occurred in 2021 through 2023, and we've had the highest iLearn proficiency on iLearn since the creation of the zone in 2023. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay. Here, all 5 zone schools, you can see each of them from top to bottom, and then we have our average as well as SBCSE's average. And all 5 zone schools saw above the SBCSE average growth in ELA, and the 4 elementary schools in the zone above SBCSE average growth in math. Warren had the highest growth in math and the second highest growth in ELA of all high needs and non-high needs schools in SBCSE. Here we can see that Warren had the highest proficiency levels of all comparable high needs elementary schools. Harrison outperformed Lincoln and Measle in both subjects, ELA and math, Madison in math, and Coquillard and Wilson outperformed Measle in both subject areas. When we look here, we can look at all 4 elementary schools, and we observe for ELA proficiency greater than Lincoln, McKinley, and Measle. At all 4 of our schools. Coquillard, Harrison, and Warren observed greater growth in math than the 3 schools, and Warren saw greater growth, including Madison, in both subjects, ELA and math. For middle school, we can see that the proficiency rates are lower overall, and we can also see the growth in proficiency rates for ELA on the right-hand side, and for math are in the positive direction and greater than other schools in both of those subjects. What we're going to do next is look through some slides of spotlights that we found for different zone schools and be able to highlight some of that information in comparison to others, both SBCSE high need schools, all SBCSE schools, and St. Joseph County charter schools, as well as some of them all Indiana schools. You can see here proficiency in math, just general education, all SBEZ on the left compared to high needs. The next one you can see special education, all SBEZ next to high needs. For free and reduced lunch in math, all SBEZ and high needs. For SBZ elementary, Black students in math specifically, compared to SBCSE high needs and all SBCSE. And see Coquillard special education students in both content areas, ELA and math, compared to SBCSE high need schools and St. Joseph charter schools. You can see Coquillard's free and reduced lunch students in math in comparison to the SBCSE high needs. Harrison and Warren's 3rd grade students, specifically 3rd grade in math, compared to SBCSE high needs and charter schools. And Harrison free and reduced lunch students in math specifically, compared to SBCSE high needs, all SBCSE, and charter schools. You can see Navarre's 8th grade students in ELA and math, compared to SBCSE's middle school high needs schools. Warren's 4th grade students in ELA and math, we're comparing here to high need schools in SBCSE schools, all SBCSE charter schools, as well as all of Indiana, both for ELA and math. Warren's general education students in ELA, compared to SBCSE high needs, all SBCSE, and charter. Warren's Black students in ELA, compared to high needs schools in SBCSE. Warren's free and reduced lunch students in both content areas, ELA and math, And here we're including all SBCSE as well, charter schools, and all of Indiana. Wilson and Harrison, English language learners specifically in English language arts. You can see Harrison and Wilson compared to SBCSE high need schools, all SBCSE and charter schools. Harrison and Warren, Black students in math. Same comparison. Harrison and Wilson, white students in math compared to SBCSE high needs. Warren, Harrison, and Coquillard, Hispanic students in math. Warren and Harrison, Hispanic students in ELA. Warren, Harrison, and Coquillard, male students in math. Warren, female and male students in ELA compared to both SBCSE high needs schools and the charter schools in the county.
Ms. Long, you had a question?
Any questions before?
Oh, wait, no, I do.
Okay.
You saw me right, didn't you, Dr. So, I appreciate how you've laid out the differences and perhaps, I don't know if you have enough time to kind of I'm sure you all have enough time to digest that, but what, if you could delineate maybe 3 things that you think were different or programs or changes that the zone did that enabled us to have these better results, what would those be?
Sure. So as I've talked about before, for learning to happen, for great teaching and learning to happen, you need the right environment. And so the Q2 reset, where we focused on high expectations and making sure that we're reducing disciplinary issues and increasing attendance. If kids are in school, then they're being exposed to more content. And if kids are behaving and not being sent out of the office for referral, then they're being exposed to more content. If teachers have less disruptive classrooms, then they can spend more time teaching than managing behaviors. And administrators can spend more time observing and coaching and supporting teachers if they're not having to deal with behaviors. So improving the conditions for teaching and learning to happen is the first thing I'll note. The second thing is high expectations. Getting here and last year saying teachers, you need to write lesson plans, and administrators, you need to review lesson plans and provide feedback on lesson plans each week. We got a lot of pushback for that because that just wasn't happening. And so you have teachers going into classrooms with no lesson plans previously, or the ones with lesson plans not getting feedback from administrators.
Can I ask you on the point about the lesson plan and feedback? Was there more pushback from, I'm just saying, our seasoned veteran teachers versus emergency permit teachers, or what's your feeling?
So I didn't look specifically at that. When it comes to feedback, when it comes to lesson planning or professional development, which is probably the third thing that I'll point to, what have you, it's less about tenure and more about mindset. And we have a number of individuals who have a mindset that they don't need continuous improvement or continuous learning. I certainly try to model being the lead learner in the organization. I'm certainly back in school. I've done various fellowships, trying to increase my own professional development because learning is continuous. But we have had historically a lot of folks, leaders and teachers, with a mindset that they don't need professional development, that they know everything already, that they are right, not just that they're right, but they're right all the time. And so that's where you really see the difference is mindset. So it's less about tenure and more about mindsets.
so maybe I'm going deep here, but how were you able to identify those who were resistant to the mindset, the shift in environment that you're trying to create? How did you identify those folks? How does that come to pass?
I didn't have to, they make it known. They come to professional development. If and when they do come, they disrupt, they distract, they try to have side conversations, they don't submit lesson plans. And then when an administrator says, well, where's your lesson plan, you're late, it's the why do I have to do this? I've been doing this for however long, or this is pointless. Or you have folks that, what I like to describe as passive sabotage, where everyone on the grade level is rowing in this direction and someone else is intentionally rowing in the opposite direction. So I can tell you we had teachers, for example, when all the other teachers were enforcing expectations like, students, you need to be in your classroom when the bell rings, and then you have one teacher that says, I'm not going to enforce that, so just come and go when you please. And so for, I'm certainly not a parent, but for those of you who are parents, think about the idea of, your kids playing mom against dad. And then if both parents are aligned, then they try grandparents, right? And that's just what kids do with adults. And so if you have 5 adults on one grade level team saying this is the expectation, and then you have 1 and 2 saying, well, ignore everybody else, it becomes very evident. Does that answer your question?
It does. And I don't mean to take you off track, so you were delaying, I think you're second, and I asked for 3.
That was the second one.
Yeah, and so.
The third one was around investing in professional development. So I know for a lot of folks, ending school early on a Thursday to do professional development means less instructional minutes. But for me personally, I think it's better to have less good quality instructional minutes than more mediocre instructional minutes. And so a lot of teachers thought that professional development was beneficial. And I can tell you firsthand that I would go into buildings on Fridays or the following Mondays, and teachers would say, I'm doing something that I just learned last week, Thursday in PD. And so a lot of teachers pointed to the positive impact of professional development in moving them forward. Just kind of to give you a number 4, which ties to the second one, coming to South Bend, something that I experienced, there's an apparent mindset around what the role of a principal is, that a principal is a building manager. We make sure that everything runs smoothly and that people are where they're supposed to be, and kind of changing that mindset to the principal as the instructional leader. And I can share, at one point getting pushback from principals and saying, look, if I have to change your title from principal to building instructional leader so you understand what your job is, I will do that. You can, in my opinion, spend as much money as you want on the best curriculum and program, but if you don't have someone coming out of their office, going into the classroom, monitoring the implementation of that program, then it doesn't matter how good that program is, it's not going to work. So you have to have, just as how teachers cannot teach from behind their desk, administrators can't lead from their office. So you need to be out of your office, you need to be watching what's happening in the hallway, going into classrooms, monitoring instruction, monitoring the implementation of whatever curriculum or program. I don't care how much money you spend, these things can implement themselves and they can evaluate themselves. And so really changing expectations for principals as well. I need you out of your office probably at least 85% of the time.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
We're going to continue with, just a brief focus and spotlight on 3rd grade. Excuse me. We have several 3rd grade literacy assessments, and would like to just speak to those 3 assessments that all happen in the spring. 2 of them are state assessments, and 1 of them is part of our formative assessment suite, our iReady benchmark assessments that we do 3 times a year. So I'd like to speak to specifically literacy and to look at 3rd grade, because reading proficiency in 3rd grade is something that at a national level is known to be a really key marker for students in terms of risk of dropout and in terms of when there should be some solid skills at grade level, and if not, the risk in terms of their achievement academically and beyond reading, beyond literacy. The first one is I Read 3, and I Read 3 is an assessment that has been only for third graders at the beginning of March, early to mid-March, and it occurs for third graders. We've actually opted into a second grade additional layer, and it allows us to look at if students are passing third grade assessment in second grade, if they're on track to pass the assessment in second grade, or if they're at risk in second grade. And it provides us with that additional year before the I Read 3 assessment actually happens. The I Read 3 assessment is really addressing the foundational literacy skills related to grade level text. And so that's what I Read 3 does, just literacy and standalone in early March. Our iReady end of year last year was mid to end of March. And that assessment, iReady, has reading and math, as you all know, and we have in third grade are assessing beginning, mid, and end of year. We did it in March, we will do it this year. All of our end of year will be in May. But that's measuring 5 different domains of reading or literacy, specifically vocabulary, phonemic awareness, phonics, by the time they're in third grade, high frequency words and comprehension, informational and literature. So looking at different types of text, which is also done with I Read 3. iLearn is that end of year statewide assessment, and it is measuring the mastery of grade level standards. So the specific English language arts standards for third grade, measuring those, some with more weight than others, and also looking at writing. So we have all of the text comprehension pieces, excuse me, as well as writing as part of the LA standards. Writing is not assessed in the other two. When some people ask about I Read 3 and iLearn specifically, both being state assessments, in particular looking at literacy and for third grade, the I Read 3 is letting us know if students can read, and the iLearn is letting us know how well they can read, really kind of digging into the level of reading at a standard for the grade level. So that's kind of the 3 points of data that we have for third grade reading. And again, second grade, although we don't have iLearn for second grade, we now, as of last year, have begun to get second grade information on how they'll do in third grade on iRead.
Just a real quick thing. So muting the computer means we don't get feedback, but also means we can't hear from Sam or Rosa. So Rosa had a question maybe on your previous one. Rosa, we can hear you now.
One second.
There's a lot of it's all right.
How about now?
Okay. I think there's still a lot of feedback. I was gonna just my question about parents about Warren. I'm sorry. Can you still hear me?
We can hear you now without an echo, I believe.
Okay, great. Thanks. Just a quick comment, because I know our schedule is really tight. If you have any, maybe this isn't the time to ask this question now, but just for future, I'm a little concerned about Warren and closing and Warren and the grade scores. I'm trying to settle myself with the data that we get and how, as a board member, how we kind of resolve this. Again, it's not something we need to answer now, but I was wondering if that was a concern any of us had as we're looking at this great data from Warren. That's it. That's all the comment I wanted to say.
I didn't know. comment taken, and I'm excited to say in a few minutes, I'm going to be handing off to at least talk a little bit more about Warren in terms of what they've done directly from the principal, and I'm sure there's further conversation or comment on the item. If we're okay, we can move on right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Looking at those 3 data points, I just quickly wanted to share for our schools and our total SBEZ for 3rd grade. You can see I Read 3, I Ready data, and I Learn. In terms of percent proficiency, percent passed, or percent at or above grade level, depending on how it's defined, but all of those are pretty much the same. You can see the differences in scores between I Learn and I Ready and I Read. I think the best, or I guess most succinct way to explain that is this idea of, can students read versus the rigor and the depth of the standard for mastery on I Learn. There aren't any other questions. Just wanted to close out this section by mentioning that despite having percentages of diverse learners that exceed in many cases all SBCSE schools, SBCSE high needs schools, and also having in many cases more EP, teachers on an emergency permit, we saw tremendous growth, and we're excited about the things we're doing to move things forward, but wanted to make note of that. I am going to, before handing it over, I'm going to just share a little bit of information regarding what happens with these data in terms of the school and what that translates to in terms of strategies and improvements. We know we have a lot of work to do. We've had great growth on iLearn, and there's significant work that still needs to be done. Our principals engage in a process for school improvement that is beyond a school improvement document, but it's really engaging in a comprehensive needs assessment, taking different data into consideration, and one key piece of data, not the only one, but one key piece of data is the iLearn data that tells us about student achievement and what's happening. And that can be sliced or disaggregated in ways that really help a school-based leadership team and a principal engage in that analysis to inform what they're going to do. These analyses really help practices change, right? Instructional practices, strategies that might be school-wide or grade level, supports that are going to be given to particular teachers or grade levels, and the allocation of resources. So those lessons learned are helpful in not only the school level, but also across schools. Leaders and schools can't control all of the factors that relate to student achievement. We want to bring that up, but this examination can be really helpful in informing what is done and it being targeted to what might be happening in the data. With that being said, I'm going to hand it over to our Warren principal, Dr. Coughlin-Bradley, and she'll share a little bit about Warren as a school spotlight today.
Good evening, everyone, board members, Dr. Lewis. When I arrived at Warren in January of 2023, we noticed several things that myself and the assistant principal that we wanted to change in order for us to get our teachers to meet or exceed those expectations, those high expectations, and to challenge our students so that they can experience success. One of the first things that we saw that we needed to change is that we understood going in, we had about 34% special education in our building. But what we weren't prepared to see is for those special education students to spend the majority of their day in a self-contained classroom. So we began to move them out into the general ed classroom, one, so that they could learn how to socialize with their peers in the general education environment, but also two, so that they could be exposed to grade level material, which is important for our students that are taking the iLearn. They must be exposed to grade level material in order to compete, and that was so important for these students. We had many of our students who ended up being in general education for about 90 to 95% of their day because they were doing so well. And so that really had a great impact not only on iLearn, but on behaviors. So you didn't have the behaviors because these students were now being challenged in an environment where they felt safe and welcome. The other thing that we did was that we put autonomy, we gave the autonomy to the teachers to do what they knew as the experts in the classroom would help create a level of success. And that was to go in there and teach our teachers how to differentiate. We walked in and there were a lot of whole group instruction, but we found that small group centers, rotation stations, is what we needed in order for our students to be individualized in their education, because we know that all students learn different rates, especially at the K2 level, and they progress at different rates. So we wanted teachers to be able to meet students where they were, as well as expose them to grade level material. The one thing that I proposed to my teachers at one of our first meetings was to teach our students a grade level ahead, and they kind of all dropped their jaw like, our kids about 2 grade levels behind, I'm going to teach them grade level ahead. But when you accelerate learning, you are immediately creating an atmosphere where students, not only are they motivated to learn, but they will learn, because now they know that they can learn, and that's what's important. It's important that our students know, and my motto and my belief is that all children can learn. And so that's what I push with my teachers. When I walk into a classroom, I want to see grade level material being taught, being done, being studied, and I also want to see something that's going to challenge our students. And what our teachers begin to find out is that many of our students are very well capable of being challenged and doing work the grade level ahead. And so the push was necessary in order for those students to feel successful as well. It's not just the ones that were below, but even the ones that were at or above. They needed the extra push to also continue in that area. We leveraged our data from our iReady benchmarks as well as our K-12 visual data, and we would take those apart and disaggregate the data in our PLCs, in our PDs, and in our school meetings in order for us to pinpoint exactly where our students needed to be reached. And we could break it down in iReady via domain in both math and ELA, and then we used that K-12 data that showed whether or not our students were gaining enough information, were they learning the year's information within this time, were they on schedule to be proficient by the time the iLearn came around. We were able to use that visual data to help us. With our iReady data, one thing that we found that really worked for us was that we had to have our kids work on grade level material on their pathway. So the thing with iReady is when you take the test, you can score below grade level, or your pathway is going to be below grade level. And most of the teachers didn't know that at first. And so what we ended up doing was letting the students do their pathway, and then we had teachers assign them grade level material on their iReady so that they could not only close the gaps, but also continue to learn at grade level. This was very efficient in our math program, which is why the scores were so high, because that was something that we pushed. Yes.
Could you say that again? So I make sure I heard what I thought I heard. Tell me again about how the iReady will project you out. If you're below, say that again.
So it's a computer adapted test. So if you score below grade level, your pathway will begin below grade level.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of our kids who may have scored below grade level, their pathway just continues to move on below grade level until they take another benchmark test. And if they come up a little bit, it'll go, you can be 2 grades behind and still not catch up. So what we found that worked well for us is they can do their pathway, but we extended the math time to a 90-minute block. During that time, they also have to be assigned grade level material on iReady. So you do your pathway, but you're also going to receive grade level material, not just in class, but also on iReady. And that can come in the form of an assignment that you have to complete. It can come in the form of homework, but they had to do the grade level material as well. They couldn't just stay on that pathway if it tested them to be 2 grade levels behind. And that made a big difference.
So that was something that coming in, I'm not a fan of iReady. So you take iReady at the beginning of the year, and then all the content that kids get subsequently is going to be based on an assessment that they do 3 weeks into the school year. And so what you end up happening is that students will receive content in iReady that is below where they actually are, and you just keep doing that, and you're getting all 100s, but you're getting 100s and, you know, fabulous scores at content that is well below your grade level, and you never get to see on grade level content. Now, most folks don't know that you can adjust the pathway after taking iReady. So that was something that we did. And the other thing that we really pushed was to get away from the idea that iReady is also the lesson, which is something that a lot of teachers do. It can be a crutch for teachers who don't plan. It's just get on your computer and follow your pathway, because the assumption is that the pathway is personalized, which it is, but it's based on, in many ways, incomplete data. Because again, most schools are taking iReady within the first 2 to 3 weeks of the school year, where all you've done is practice routines and procedures and team builders, right? So that, you know, changing mindset that iReady is a tool and not your lesson plan, as well as showing teachers how they could readjust these pathways, was something that we really worked on.
And I appreciate those additional feedbacks, because it really just speaks to what I think I heard earlier is professional development and our professionals understanding that it's really based on individualizedness. That's not really a word. I think honing in on your student, knowing your student, and knowing where they can go, and not relying on what necessarily what 1 or 2 tools give you, but you're the adult, you're a professional in the room. So using those tools plus what you know about the student to push them past and forward to where they need to go, right? Is that what I think I heard?
Yeah.
Yes.
That makes sense to me? Okay.
And all of that requires a principal coming out, monitoring what's happening in the classroom, teachers increasing their. So many of our teachers, when we said, you know, you can adjust your iReady pathway, they're like, what are you talking about? We had to show them how to do it. That requires professional development. And then putting in guardrails as well, so that they couldn't abuse the changing of that. So again, principals have to monitor professional development. So thank you, Dr. Scott Bradley. And we now have Ms. Roden stepping in for, we have another question for Warren.
It's not a question, I just want to say thank you for having more confidence in our students than iReady. And thank you for pushing them and seeing, and giving them the opportunity to excel maybe in ways they didn't think they could. And we see the evidence is there. Thank you.
Yeah, I would also, maybe back to the question from one of our board members earlier, Rosa. I hope we take some things we learned from what you've accomplished, and as we continue down the path and you know, move on, obviously with the closure of Warren, that we can take what we've learned and what you've been able to do and apply that across to the other schools. So I echo the comments. Thank you.
So our teachers became very motivated because I told them I don't like to be last on anyone's list. So we're gonna make this happen. And when I first came in, it was a lot of pushback, but after a while, because I told them I'm in this with you guys as much as you are, and they were able to start seeing the success of our students, they became very motivated and believed that they could do.
Yeah, and I'll be clear too, my comments aren't critical of the other schools. They're complimentary of what you've done to say, hey, let's share best practices, and everyone's trying, I know, in all our schools, but congratulations on that success.
Before we move on, just making sure Sam and Rosa, any comments or questions before we move on to Navarre? Good, it looks like they're okay. All right, we're here.
Good evening, Dr. Lewis, members of the Empowerment Zone, Executive Board. Hi. I'm Jennifer Roden. I'm the assistant principal at Navarre Middle School. Principal Harris does send his deepest apologies for not attending today. I'm sure he'll follow up with you, Dr. Lewis, later. So just thinking about Navarre and our past challenges, last year we had numerous substitute teachers in classrooms and a lot of vacancies on our teaching staff. With those, we also had a lot of classroom management issues, even of our staff that were present and full-time employees. And what this accumulated to is, just like Dr. Bradley mentioned, a lot of classrooms that were teaching below grade level content and not reaching the state standards that are necessary in order to push our students forward. So at Navarre, we're looking at moving forward by increasing our accountability for teachers. We're doing that in numerous ways, including we've added a tracker for our student support team to be pushing into classrooms, and we've already had 54 visits since implementing that on Friday last week. So now our student support team is going in and letting administration and the Dean of Academics know what's going on in the classrooms. We're holding those high expectations for the students in terms of really emphasizing that grade level instruction and not lowering the bar, but like Dr. Bradley mentioned, acceleration, not remediation. And that goes into our second bullet point of teaching at grade level. So we're really emphasizing at Navarre that we teach the state standards. We don't teach a curriculum, we don't teach a tool. We teach the students what we are there to do, which is teach them grade level content and grade level instruction, and use our curriculums and our resources to support that. But if at any point in time, if those resources or curriculum are holding us back from reaching grade level content, we're going to ensure that we adhere to those state standards. Our student support team is working on making sure that all the classrooms are getting the support that they need for all of the students. That looks like we just implemented some new trackers in terms of parent phone call logs and implementing some systems to ensure a streamlined communication process, as well as administration trackers for classroom observations. And then we have an increased focus on the response intervention and MTSS process. We were able to fully staff our social work team, as well as hire 3 interventionists who will be pushing in and pulling out students in a more traditional intervention process. And we look forward to the results we're going to get from that, as well as building in longer instructional blocks to allow for intervention to be done with our ELA and math teachers in 6th grade specifically. 7th and 8th grade will be following those intervention teachers with the typical pull out or push in model. So those are some of the things we have going on at Navarre. What questions do you have for me?
Thank you for that. You said Ms. Roder?
Wrote it, yeah.
Roder. Thank you. How many observations with feedback are done per year? Is the minimum 2, or how many? Are you all doing something different more than the minimum?
So the minimum required by the board contract, the teacher union contract, is 2 formal observations a year. Our formal observation process is going to have a pre-observation meeting, which will happen early in semester 1, and then a formal observation that will happen starting in quarter 2 and at the end of semester 1. We'll then move into a formal meeting at the start of semester 2, and then a formal observation in quarter 4. So teachers will be doing some goal setting and some self-reflection on either the RISE rubric or the teacher effectiveness rubric that Dr. Lewis had shared with principals at a principal meeting. And based off of those goals, then have the formal observations. However, we're also doing a lot of informal observations and classroom visits. So I was stopped at the end of the school day today by one of our new teachers to be informed that in the first 5 days of school, she's seen Principal Harris, Dr. Lewis, Ms. Zapata, as well as our Dean of Academics. And she was trying to take it personally that I hadn't made it to her classroom yet. And so we're also doing these informal pop-ins to get the data that we need so we can see our teachers grow throughout time. So really emphasizing that everybody who walks into a classroom might have glows and grows. So like I said, our student support team, which is our peace builders, our deans of student culture, our even security guards have access to the observation form that's just shared with the administration team. So we have like 54 data points on our staff from the support staff that's seeing the students' experience and coming in and out that we've acquired. And then obviously I could get really nerdy with pivot tables, and I'm going to stop myself.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the point and the reason why I asked, I just was curious because I think the difference, the value add is the informal pre-observation, and it's not punitive, which on the other hand, it's not punitive, it's informative, and it's what, I don't know, continuous development, right?
I'll just add the process that Ms. Roden kind of described a while ago is separate and apart from the RISE process. The zone has the autonomy to use a different teacher evaluation system. So the team this summer, Ms. Zapata and I worked really hard to create a separate evaluation tool and system for teachers and administrators. And that is something that we're looking to roll out at all schools. We will meet with the NEA hopefully before the end of August to get their feedback on said tool. But I will say that when we mentioned it to them last year that we were looking at creating our own evaluation system, they were very enthusiastic about that. So that's one of the ways in which we are taking advantage of the autonomy that we have as a zone.
And it also builds in with the K-12 lift work that we're doing. So those first meetings at the start of each semester is really to goal set and make sure that teachers have a clear line of sight on not only what are my practices and goals for how I'm going to instruct in my classroom, but also what are the student outcome goals, and are we looking at data and following a data process. So it's supported not only by our observations, but also by our deep dives into data using the K-12 lift, the iReady benchmarks, and other pieces of data.
I have a question. Looking back at one of the challenges that you had there, can you point to maybe one or two, you would say, significant policies or practices that really helped improve overall classroom management?
I would say the number one thing that helped with classroom management is sitting down, and Principal Harris led this PD, and coming up with common expectations for the entire building and adhering to those expectations school-wide. So it started with the Q2 reset that Dr. Lewis began with the uniforms and the backpacks, but also going into what's the cell phone policy, when is the policy to call for help, and really helping teachers establish where's the line between supporting a student and making a different choice in the classroom and respecting the rights of everyone else in that classroom to learn, and having that student support team be on the same page as the teacher staff. So it was that early release PD time, the time for us to develop as a staff to really get on the same page with how we implement the rules and regulations and even classroom procedures of entering the classroom and sitting down, those being more consistent. And we're definitely not 100% consistent with some of the things like entering the classroom, but students seeing that a few times a day has really done wonders to build in that I understand what's expected to me and now I can meet that expectation.
Thank you.
Great. As we move on, we're going to deviate from our agenda a little bit. We're going to move next to item number 9. So by way of background, if you remember back at the end of the last school year throughout the summer, this board is engaged in numerous conversations with the board from the Southland Community School Corporation about the future of the zone. We've had some terrific productive discussions, I think, with those entities. And over the course of time, I think it come to some consensus that some, well, not to speak on behalf of the board, it seems that there's some interest in extending the zone beyond its existing term. And so on August 7th, the Board of Trustees for the Southland Community School Corporation voted to extend or to approve the resolution to extend the zone through June of 2026. And so that's in a sense the final year of the initial term of the zone plus 2 additional years, so through June of 2026. And so included in your packet is a copy of that resolution. I think what we had hoped generally was that the 2 boards might concur on that decision to extend the zone. And so for your consideration this evening is a resolution that we basically we would sign the same resolution there. So throwing it out there for discussion of this board as we consider the extension of the zone. Ms. Paul?
Well,
Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, just given the data that we've just received and given the great reports and the progress that we've seen, both school-specific, Warren and Navarre, and district-wide, I think it will prove to be not only a good decision for the students who attend the zone schools, but also because there'll be carryover, there'll be, sharing of best practices. I think it'll be good for the Southland Community School Corporation as well. So I only wish it was a little longer, but for reasons I understand.
fall.
Thank you. My comment in regards to extension, I'm excited about the extension. I'm excited about the differences and how we're trying to enhance the experience of students. How I think that it's, at least at this point, demonstrating a positive impact, and I'd like to see that continue. So I'm excited about that. How we go forward past 2026, I cannot say, but I'm glad that there's opportunity to continue the work.
My comment, people hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Sam.
So my comment was that I'm excited about the momentum that's been built. And so you really see some great results this year. And at the momentum that we're building now with our teacher, staff, faculty, administration, with our students and families, to see that extended for a couple more years, I think is a win. And I wanted to thank the South Bend School Corporation, Stephanie, as well, you're present today, for the support around the partnership that we're trying to build and that we want to ensure that we maintain over the next few years. And I think for the deep partnerships that the South Bend Empowerment Zone as an organization has built in this community, it was noticeable in these last few major events that we've held and all that. So I think I'm excited to see a couple more years and excited to see our continued progress, and thank everybody for their hard work in this process.
Yeah, I would add, when this started, I can acknowledge I was not involved in those detailed discussions when this started. But what I would say is I know it was a difficult situation to manage and come up with where we sit today, back when this started. But I'll echo my appreciation for the confidence of the trustees of the school corporation to support moving forward. When this started three and a half or so years ago, it was something different. It was an acknowledgement that we need to do something different to support these schools. And I think while no different than many other schools, we had some challenges, ups and downs through COVID. To the credit of many, including Dr. Lewis, and obviously staff as well, we persevered. And as everyone else has said, beginning to show some real progress and opportunity to make a difference for these kids that attend these schools. And that's what this is all about when this started 3.5 years ago, is to change the path for these students. And that is the sole focus. Apart from any other agenda, it is to change the path of these students. And I think we're having success with that. So I think this is fantastic to continue on.
And I'd just like to echo, Ryan, you touched on it, just the leadership of Dr. Lewis and his courage, his determination, his wisdom to select the staff that can support him. And I think it is paid dividends. And it would be remiss if we didn't just really thank him and his team for the great work that they've done in the empowerment zone.
Rosa, I'll give you a chance if you had anything to add to that discussion.
I wanted to echo everything that's been said so far. It's sometimes hard to believe that Dr. Lewis really hasn't been with us very, very long. It feels like it's only been, this last year, this time, right? And thinking of some radical changes that he had proposed to us, such as clear backpacks and, I remember you talking about high expectations, attendance rates, all of these things that you have worked so hard, Dr. Lewis, and we are reaping the benefits from that, and the fact that we have had autonomy to do that is something that I want to highlight, and I think that's what makes our South Bend Empowerment Zone work. And I am just grateful and thankful. Stephanie, you have been such a great support, being our liaison as well. So I wanted to mention that. So a lot of hard work has gone through, and I just want to say kudos to all of you. And I honestly love working with our board members here as well. So I just wanted to say those comments.
Great. I'll just add as we wrap up board comments. I think you all said it better. I don't think I can say it better, but I do also want to reiterate the vote of confidence that this is for Dr. Lewis and the team that he's put in place and the effort that we've undertaken in the last 4 years. We obviously had some interruptions that we hadn't planned on, but we persevered. And Stephanie said, well, we don't know what 2026 will look like, but I have high hopes that we're achieving it at a very high level, and we're having some important discussion about kind of that next chapter. That this is an important vote, I think, in terms of the current chapter, and I'm grateful to the school corporation for their partnership on this. The next, I'll close the board comments. The next piece of our process is public comments. We had no one sign up online to speak. We had no one sign up to speak this evening. So I will close the public comment section and then move to the pleasure of the board related to the resolution on the extension.
Stephanie also moved to ratify the extension.
Sam, second.
Great. Moved by Stephanie, second by Sam. Any other discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We're going to move next to item number 10. So from time to time, people's situations change and they're not able to provide the commitment level needed to fulfill responsibilities here. So we have an action item here on the removal of Ashley Morgan from the South Bend Empowerment Zone Board. Per our bylaws, it's just been really difficult, I think, with life circumstances for her to participate. It impacts our ability to get a quorum and such, and so the recommendation is that we remove Ashley from the board. Per our bylaws, we have the ability to do that. Section F says the director may be removed with or without cause by vote of a majority of the board of directors. I'd like to make a motion that we remove Ashley from the Empowerment Zone Board.
I move to remove Ashley from the board.
Second.
So move to second. Any other discussion?
I'd also just echo, it's great when we have volunteers that are able to do a great job and get engaged. And I wanted to thank Ashley for the time when she was able to engage with us and contribute to the organization, and thank her for her time. But thought it was important that we take this action.
My only question to those who might have reached out to our fellow board member, did we have any discussion? I understand the bylaws, but did we better reach out?
We reached out on numerous occasions with no response, unfortunately, just decided that we really needed to.
Yes, Steph, it was me personally that tried on a couple occasions just to try to confirm and to have a conversation, and decided this was the best action to take.
Thank you.
So it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Any opposed? All right, it passes. Thank you again, Ashley, for your service. We're going to go backwards now to item number 8. Rhonda has joined us. We're going to, under business services, we have our finance reports. We'll go your way.
All right, good evening, board members. I will be presenting the June financials this evening for your approval. High level, once these financials are approved, the audit for 22-23 can begin. So I think this is a good break point before we get into July, August, next upcoming board meetings. To start, on slide 64, here is the zone statement of financial activity, basically revenue that came in and expenses that went out the door. As you can see, our big ticket items are revenue coming in from various funds that we requisitioned from SBCSC and then going out to cover payroll. If you subtracted the payroll, you would see that we expended, in terms of our expenses, you will see that the zone itself only expended about $10,000 this month. Primarily, most of that was taken up with website communications expenses. So there's some context on what we spend a month. There's no questions there. We'll move on. Next statement is a statement of financial position for our 501c3. As you can see, we had a healthy balance back in June. You'll see bank account balance, accounts receivable, again, are just revenue. We're anticipating that we've requisitioned the District 4 to cover our payroll that was in transit. And those are other current assets. And you'll see other current liabilities is really just the ebb and flow between our benefits that we've received reimbursements before we've actually paid them. Sometimes we get reimbursed because payroll is bi-weekly before we make the benefits payment, which is monthly.
Could I clarifying question maybe and acknowledge that you could probably take 2 hours to answer this. We'll try to see if we can very high level speak to just as we look at the statement of activity and see, a significant surplus for the month of 170,000. We look at the statement of financial position and see a strong cash position. Can you speak a little bit just to timing as funds come through and maybe especially through grants and different funding streams, how that lines up with the timing when cash disbursements occur, and then ultimately the expectation of what we will spend as you kind of look at cash flow?
Okay, I think I understand your question. So basically, being that we have about a $1 million budget per year, and we're wrapping up this year, it looks like, hey, we're in a good financial position. So we then wouldn't requisition SBCSC for the full $1 million to run our operating budget. We would reconcile like, okay, we have a decent cash balance, probably due to timing from when the previous request was requisitioned from the prior administration. So we've still been working on, I haven't made any requisitions for funds to fund our 501c3. We've been working on requisitions from the previous admin. So with that said, we'll look at the balance in the next week or so and discuss in our next committee meeting how much the requisition from SBCSC that we'll seek to get to our $1 million operating fund for the year. So looking at the health where we are right now, it might only be $300,000, for example, just to have a $1 million operating fund for the year. We wouldn't ask for it all, it would stay in our education fund, from which our teachers, peers, and everything else come out of. So this could be very good for us. Yeah. Continue. Okay. So we took a look at statement of financial position. Okay, slide 66, budget to actuals. Again, as we're wrapping up our 22-23 budget, you can see our total budget at the bottom line was about $1,087,000. What we actually spent was $973,000, so we were under budget for the year. Obviously, some accounts or some line items we went over and some we went under, but overall under budget. And then we can adjust, when we meet in our finance committee meeting, we can talk about adjustments to maybe we'll budget a little more for accounting and auditing. We can set up the budget. We will be setting up the budget for the 23-24 school year. Okay, next. If there are no, yes.
I have a question. Thank you. And I apologize for just not being as clear on, I think a change to come in the MOU, but I think there's a change in how often the zone could requisition. Maybe that's not the right word. You shaking your head, no. Some kind of change from either went from monthly to quarterly or quarterly to biannually. Can you tell me what that change is and how that might affect our finances? Is it coming? Am I mistaken? There's some kind of change, I think.
There is no outside of the things listed in the resolution, which include the elimination of the automatic renewal, explicitly naming representation to CBA and the end date of 2026. There are no other material changes.
Okay.
To the MOU at this time.
All right, thank you. I remember seeing, there's been a lot of stuff.
I do think in the early discussion,
Okay.
because I think both boards ultimately decided it's simpler just to focus on those couple items and not make material.
Thank you. There's just so much we've seen. I was like, do we make a change? Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Rose. I have a quick question. So whenever we do like fundraising or like something that Ryan has done in the past, or like ID Tech might contribute to certain events and things like that, where does that go?
So if you take a look on slide 64, the very first one, we made a new line item this year under revenue for contributions. So for this month, I believe when we drilled down in the finance committee meeting, we got $200 worth of contributions or donations, but ended up paying our vendors more, so that's why that's a negative $50. But we do have a line 4,400 for contributions.
Thank you.
All right. And just for full disclosure, some of the student services funds are housed with SBCSC, like their SB Alive grant, and we requisition the district when the grants are larger. We go through their system. But if they're small grants, maybe 500 to 1,000, something small, we'll run it through the 501c3, so we have faster access to pay their vendors for the event, for example, that they're looking to hold, that they fundraise for. So some of their funds are housed here, very few, and most at the district at this moment, if they have a balance. Okay. All right. Moving on from budget to actuals, you see slide 67. Here's our all funds update, which is a recap. I was able to pull up to June 22. So close enough to the end of the year, I hope, so you can see where we're at with all our other funds. We are still on track to have a balance that we can use for the 23-24 school year. As you see, about $6 million primarily from ESSER to help slide and stave off this budget cliff. So we are still on track and holding off the budget cliff for one more year.
So any additional questions on the financials? Or online?
I think just observation or comment, I think it's important to clarify. So on that all funds update, as we look at a number of slightly over 6.1 million that, is on the plus side. So again, I want to acknowledge the good work to quickly make some changes to be able to set us up so that effectively next year we are positioned to try to operate with obviously significantly less dollars coming from the ESSER funds, so that we are in a sense almost beginning to already operate on a much smaller scale in terms of our expenses. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, definitely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
So if there are no other questions, a motion be in order related to the financial.
Yeah, I make a motion to approve the financial reports for the month of June.
A second.
Moved by Mr. Mathis, second by Mr. Wilson. No other discussion, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The financials passed, thank you, Ron. Appreciate that. David, in our last few minutes, I didn't mean to shortchange your time, but anything, the personnel report is included in your packet there. Anything you wanted to mention on that?
We are currently 94% staff. We have a staff to student ratio of 1 to 5.7 students, so it's a better ratio than it was last year. Slightly, the central office staff is down 54%, which was kind of a mandate in terms of having to reduce our expenses. So those would just be the 3 things I would highlight for the board.
Any questions, Dr. Bruce, on the personnel? No? Great, thank you. And then in our last 10 minutes or so, the item that we skipped that we need to come back to is our back to school. Okay, so we're gonna do a quick 6 or 7 minute back to school update.
All right, so back to school for our students and families. Let's get in the zone. I see. Okay, so here's where we are for enrollment currently. As of 8/18, we had about 1,900 students, which is a 12% decrease from last school year. And what I would like you to note, this computer stop doing this. There we go.
So that's the count on day one. That's not the count day, right?
Correct.
Official count day.
Correct. The official count date is coming up in September 15th. Historically, most schools, enrollment is going to fluctuate through the Labor Day. But just some items to note is that we do have some students currently that could be no-show and not showing up for various reasons. As we think about the why with that, with some families not starting in the middle of the week, as you see, the school started on a Wednesday. They were waiting until Monday to start, or certain families wait, just like it used to be in Chicago, they start after Labor Day, or some of them are choosing to no longer be students of the zone or Southland Community Schools and are waiting for a response from the parochial or charter schools. And so we expect the numbers of our no-show students to decrease over time. And as the school year progresses, we feel like we're going to get more families just based off of a lot of the data that Roxana and Dr. Lewis has shared with you earlier today. And so enrollment in both the zone and in school corporation, we anticipate to increase.
Are you gonna talk about the back to school? No, the Sam mentioned it. Okay. All right.
Do family orientation, as it is.
Student family orientation.
At the schools.
So we also had student family orientations at school. Each school had them. I think Navarre's was on a Saturday and our elementary schools were held in the evenings. And so as you can see listed there, in this new approach that we started with having an actual student family orientation, those are the items that all principals and other building administrators and staff were asked to go over, from the code of conduct all the way down to the parent communication, the way that they can get involved with the school, and the resource centers.
Okay, so I had the pleasure of welcoming almost 50 new teachers. So that's new to education and new to the empowerment zone. Over 2 days of professional learning. So I share some of the topics that we discussed. Of course, getting connected, because I like to be supporting our teachers. That's been a priority for me for this role, supporting our teachers throughout the school year. Of course, high impact teacher actions. As you heard from Dr. Lewis, we talked about high expectations for our staff as well as our students. Of course, we delved into a little essential teacher technology. We read The Opportunity Myth together. We did some classroom management strategies. And we were able to dig into some pathways to licensure. There has been a lot of conversation about teachers on emergency permits and people that need to show their commitment to the profession. And we want to make sure that we have licensed teachers in our classrooms. So I have curated a variety of different programming that's available in our state to put our teachers on a path to licensure. So I started that. We'll have more on that coming up soon because we have some people that are going to be signing up. And then we had our teachers work on some welcoming plans to welcome our kids to their classrooms. And I had a few pictures to highlight. And I gathered some feedback from our teachers. I'm not gonna read all of them, but the biggest thing that was mentioned was, you know, we hadn't had anything like this before. We think this kind of stuff should definitely continue, but they felt more confident and prepared and welcome to not only the empowerment zone, but confident about welcoming kids into their classrooms, and that's what we want from them.
Very briefly, I'm going to speak to our Level Up Back to School staff event, which happened August 9th. We are thrilled that some of you were able to join us, and we've got a few pictures here just to share. Our event was back to school for all SBEZ staff, and 73% of our entire zone staff attended the back to school event. 241 people to be exact. A couple of highlights. We had our Welcome to SBEZ breakfast. Thank you to those who were in the breakfast buffet serving. It was a great time to be able to connect one-on-one as people came in, and what a nice way to welcome our staff from summer break. We had our opening session with welcome remarks by Dr. Lewis, taking a look at really casting that vision, discussing and celebrating together what we've accomplished and where we're headed together. We had breakout sessions, another highlight I just want to mention, that have are tied to and aligned to our school effectiveness framework, but really looking at collaborative teaching, collaborative staff, and working together. No trust equals no team. We're stronger together, and united we thrive. Learning, leaning into collective responsibility. And those were sessions that were 40-minute breakout sessions that different principals and directors and assistant principals and other staff from our schools and from the zone were able to provide. We had ambitious instruction sessions, brief breakouts, all means all, meeting the needs of all of our students, and also had a session on the student as protagonist. Context before content, why relationships matter, no matter what the role, building relationships, establishing relationships, and caring about those relationships with our students, with our families, was one of our sessions, as well as empowering school staff for student safety. And last, how we leverage community partners and co-teaching with families fall in the invested families situation. See, I want to mention that at the end of the day, we had a closing session by Robert Jackson, very well received, and we're able to get some feedback I want to share as well. I'm going to just read some of these quotes. I'm so blown away by our growth and excited for this year. I felt hopeful and inspired. The last session was so powerful and exactly what I needed after a rough summer. All means all. We have to really listen and be open and vulnerable and share power with our students. Pour more love into these kids. The chief is here to support and invest in us so we can do the same for our students. A few other feedback, and I won't read them, but you can take a look from our welcome session, from our first breakout session, and from our closing session. We have some quotes, as well as level up being our theme. This was actually on one of the boards in the hallway, first day as we were going into schools. I believe this was at Warren, and I've seen multiple people with their level up T-shirts from the event. Not only do the quotes and the feedback speak to the mindsets and really everybody leaning in, but we also see that 73% of our staff attending the event when it was still summertime. And attending this back to school event to welcome and get us launched and started in this level up event was exciting to see. And I think speaks to everybody leaning in and the mindsets and beliefs. Yes, I'm sorry, it was summer and it was definitely optional. So again, 73%, great number for all of our staff, and this includes, everybody, not just instructional staff.
Dr. Lewis, I'll give you the final word. Anything for the good of the order you'd like to add?
Just would like to thank the team. I know we were short on time. I know you guys spent a lot of time on the presentation, so I appreciate you giving the abbreviated version. And thank you to the board, as always, who volunteer to provide oversight and governance to the zone. And thank you, everyone who is watching in person and online. And let's have a great school year. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Normally we do public comment at the end, but seeing none, we will move on from that. Any board communications before we go? If not, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Wood.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Mathis. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Great, we are adjourned.